welcome back to Real Beard News. This is Sean with Miriam.
Woohoo.
How are you doing this week?
I'm real great.
We are thriving.
Thriving. Yeah.
Killing it this week. All right, Scream 2, though. Fucking week sucks, but
Yeah.
Scream 2.
Up there with some of the worst weeks ever, but that's okay.
You know,
It's not too high up, but it's
yeah, it was pretty bad. But hey, you know what? We get to talk about Scream 2, and there's nothing better than a Scream movie to get you back up and situated.
Oh, yeah.
Back up in the air. What did you think of Scream 2?
I really liked it. Scream 1's my favorite, but Scream 2 might be my second favorite. So I really liked it. I just thought it was fun. I enjoyed the sequel aspect of it, that it wasn't really the exact same, but it still has the same vibes. I love that they have the same characters, everything. It's just fun.
Yeah, Scream 2 was fun just because you were reading earlier that it had come out slightly after less than a year than Scream 1. So like a lot of what happened in Scream 1 was still pretty vivid in everybody's mind, and it just gave more power to all the characters. And then we lost Randy. But it was good. Like he had a pretty cool death in the sense of like getting stabbed multiple times, but he tried fighting it, even though we don't see the fight. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I liked it. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun. I also liked the new characters they introduced. I felt like they were pretty real and pretty relatable of who you meet, because it's like we have Sydney's roommate, we have her boyfriend, all these things, and so it's like these are like legitimately people you'd meet in college. It didn't feel forced. Like as a person that's been to college, it felt relatable as a college student.
Yeah.
You know.
No, those characters were interesting for sure. But you saying that, how did you feel the plot and the characters were developed? Did you feel like they were developed enough? Do you feel like they were underdeveloped? Both plot and characters.
Yeah. For the characters, I wish that Mickey had been more developed, because he was, as we know, the second killer, and I felt like he didn't have a whole lot of motive, and I wasn't super tied to him. So when he was like unmasked, I didn't go, oh, no way. It was like, okay. I mean, okay, that makes sense, which I guess they weren't really supposed to be like, wow, no way, because that was more Billy Loomis's mom that we were supposed to be surprised. But I wish we had had a little bit more from him, because he was almost set up to be an evil Randy, almost, because he was super into film. He was a film buff. He also kind of wrote some of the rules in that film class that they were in. But I wish we had seen a little bit more from him. I wish they'd all become closer as friends, so it would feel more like a betrayal, because this was more like, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not mad that he's the villain, but we didn't really have enough about him for it to be like that gasp moment,
Yeah.
I enjoyed having the roommate there, Haley. She was fun, and I feel like she was a good like best friend to Sydney throughout this movie, because she didn't have that because her friend had died in the first one, and so we get to meet this new character that like is there with Sydney, trying to help her through stuff and trying to talk her out of stuff. But we also got to see kind of how Sydney doesn't really have people in her life because they keep getting killed, I think it was also really interesting to see the boyfriend, Derek, because he said all the right things to her, was always there for her, and then you kind of start to get suspicious because of like small things he does, or he'll show up at like the exact wrong times. And so I think we got to see our personal suspicions on the boyfriend, and because Randy's also like, never trust the love interest. And so we got to see him develop towards what we thought was a good guy, especially at the beginning of the movie, into like the suspicious, we don't know what he's gonna do. He seems like a nice guy, and we had, I feel like, just enough from him that he was suspicious, but like there's this piece of you that wants to trust him, and I think that they did a good job of writing his character. I also think it was cool because even near the end, it made you suspicious, like it right up until his death, if he was like the second killer, until Mickey's like, nah, and then he shoots him.
Yeah. Now, I definitely think the plot was well developed as far as, why it is that we are having these killings happening again. I feel like for most people, the connection of most of the people that are dying have some type of name association with the originals was lost on them. I know it was on me when I first watched it. But also, I would agree. Like the Mickey character was kind of underused, underdeveloped in that sense, where he could have been in more scenes. However, the last time that we saw him was when Derek goes ahead and professes his love to Sydney in the cafeteria, and then we don't see him again. But then all the murders start ramping up, so it kind of hints that he is it because we haven't seen him, or we assume that he died at some point, and then we see him unmasked, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. You make sense though because you were always a little bit of a lunatic when you were on screen, so that one makes sense. But then the one thing that I was telling you off air was like, how did Sydney never see Billy's mom? Like they were always reporters are always around with Gail and and Sydney, so how did she miss her? Like that's just a weird thing to me where it doesn't kind of make sense. But overall, the story was pretty good. The red herring of the boyfriend was really well done up until the last moment because you're like, oh no, he's good. Oh no, he's bad. You're shady. Oh no, you're okay. Oh no, like Mickey's saying that you're bad. So it kind of did well. I will say that Scream 2 also continued the betrayal of the murderers between themselves, right? Because in the first one, Billy betrays Stu kind of where he's stabbing him a little too much. So like that he's more famous in a way. And then in the second one, Billy's mom betrays Mickey, which continued up until 5, I think. Because I don't remember if Richie had a chance to betray his girlfriend at the time.
I feel like he kind of did, just simply by not telling her, and also like just being Ghostface and telling her, "Oh yeah, let's go to your hometown. Let's go take care of Tara." When in
No,
reality, he's
not
like,
her. If he betrays, what's the
oh, the other Ghostface.
yeah?
Ooh, what's her name? Oh, I can't remember. Um, yeah, I'm trying to remember if they betrayed each other. I think that she might have betrayed him actually, because she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be more famous," and she kind of just lets him go do his own thing, which is fine. But it's like they kind of had separate goals in the end, because I think the girl wanted to be more famous, and then Richie was trying to get um, back at the sister that's Billy Loomis's child. I'm totally blanking on her name, but he was trying to get back at her while the other girl was not. I don't think so. I don't remember. Tara and Sarah. Would they do that? Sarah and Tara?
Oh, now I gotta Google this. Holy crap, I'm blanking. But continue.
Yeah. I did really enjoy Mickey's motive, like in the end, because his motive was almost as shallow as his character. Because Sam. It did start with an S. You're right. I felt like Mickey. Yeah, his motive was about as shallow as his character, because it was like all he wanted to do was control the narrative, which it ended up being a pretty common Scream trope as the movies progressed. And he was like, I'm going to have the best trial. I'm going to be the most famous. And that is something that is different from Scream 1, because in Scream 1, they were like trying to be the heroes when they were, yeah, while Mickey was like, I want to take all the credit. I want to be the killer.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to be the killer and I'm going to have the best lawyers. And then they're going to write books and movies about me and I'm innocent because I'm a psychopath, which is very interesting. Were there any standout performances in the movie that you were like, either returning characters or new ones?
I actually really enjoyed Mrs. Loomis. I think she did a good job of making sure that we didn't know who she was. Like all throughout, while she was like this crazy reporter, like on Gail's back all the time, you're just like, oh my gosh, stop! You're so annoying. Get away! Like we don't want to hear from you anymore. And then to like see in the end what her motive was. Like she was attacking Gail because Gail wrote this book about Billy, and she's like, "You're wrong. My son was not a killer, or whatever, or he was innocent." And then to see like her go so crazy in the end, I think she did a really good job of portraying that like desire to get even.
Right, right. Like that, almost like that protective mom kind of a thing. Like, your son is not good, but you're still going to pretend. Yeah, I think you know what? I will 100% agree. Her performance was pretty good. Also didn't realize that she's Sheldon's mom in The Big Bang Theory,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which is pretty cool. I didn't realize that until like we were researching some stuff and I'm like, wait, her face. And then I'm like, you are. She always portrays that kind of character at this point where it's kind of almost erratic. It's very interesting. I did enjoy hers. I did enjoy Mickey though.
Yeah.
He was evil Randy, like you mentioned. So I did enjoy his performances where he just has a psychopath face. Sorry, Timothy Oliphant, but his face ain't friendly looking, bro. Like I see that face in the street. It's like a Jack Nicholson face.
That's fair.
That's what he reminds me of. Like,
Those eyebrows.
yeah, like he just has that. His eyes are very kind of like wide. His face features are just dictate I'm insane, which makes sense because, he was able to play a psychopathic murderer. So there's that.
Yeah. Sorry. I also really liked Derek because he was able to have that suspicion on him so much, and like he does play like that doting boyfriend, and he's like, Sydney, I want to be around you, I want to make sure you're safe, and she's like, no, I can't. The last time I had a boyfriend, he killed too many people, like I can't have you around me. But he's just always pushing to be with her, and it's like, are you pushing to be with her because you want to kill her or because you're actually concerned? It also takes some balls to be in a movie where you stand up on a table and you sing to your girlfriend.
I think I love you.
Blue.
Dude, I love that scene. That scene is amazing. When I was a kid and I saw that scene, I was like, I want to do that one day.
Aw.
I'm going to stand up in the cafeteria table and sing a song to the girl that I allegedly love in middle school
Wow.
or elementary. I wanted to do it.
Did you do it?
Hell no.
What song would you have sung?
Let's see. So we're talking about the 90s. So it would have been probably a Backstreet Boys song for sure. I 100% probably would like Show Me the Meaning of Being Lonely, bro. I'd just stand up there with like sing till like my heart starts to hurt or my throat starts to hurt because I don't sing from the heart, right? Or my stomach, I should honestly be saying like, my diaphragm.
As a singer, I'm offended.
Right, because you sing from your lungs. I got you.
Okay.
Until my vocal cords started to bleed like Adele. There you go. Hell, I would have gotten a record contract if I would have sang like Adele at that point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know you're Adele's #1 fan.
She's great. I love Adele. I just
She's great.
I'm gonna get some haters if I say my actual opinions about Adele.
There you go. How did you feel about the meta humor and like the self-referentiality of the movie?
I always love it.
Yeah.
I love just the meta like just anything about the meta universe of Scream. I think it's so fun. I really enjoyed that they had that class, like the film class, that they had Randy and they had Mickey and they had Cece, and they're all like talking about like the stab movies and how they're like Scream and then other things about the horror genre. And it's really fun to see, like, it's not just Randy. Like there's more people that have like these crazy ideas that Randy does. And also to see Mickey and how he's reacting to everything, because I'm sure like when you watch it back, you're like, you see that come into play like later in the movie, you know? Yeah. And then it was interesting to see Cece in the conversation because it's kind of similar to Scream 6, where like the horror professor is like finds herself in this situation and she's still going down that dark alley, you know? But then in Scream 2, Cece's in this conversation in the film class, and then she also is attacked by Ghostface. And she just keeps running around, goes up the stairs when you're not supposed to, and everything. And so she also follows the wrong steps, you know, when they talk about this like handbook of like horror genres. Right. And so you see her like doing everything wrong, and you're like, Cece, you were just in this conversation. You know what you're supposed to do, and you're not doing it. So I think that's fun to see all those three different people having that conversation, you know. And it's also like the audience is watching and you're like, yeah, you're right, this is actually real life.
and it's true, because like One of the things that they tell us when we're in training is like, will you train to be successful, kind of a thing. And I remember seeing this class on TikTok where it was like this guy was pro gun and everything. He's like, yeah, you can buy one of the like if you put your handgun in one of the code ones, you could buy that. That's fine. Are you going to remember the code when you're in a stressful situation? Because what's the point of having a gun in your little safe if you don't practice opening your safe under stress? And I remember this lady was like, oh, I could do it. It's fine. He's like, okay, come on up in front of the class. Puts her on the spot, tells her, okay, here's a key. The key is right here. So, because these things always have like a backup key, right? And then I don't remember what the situation was, but it was like he put her through a stress test basically. And she runs right by the key and then just tries to put in the code. And it doesn't remember the code, but the key is right there, like right within her reach. And she is just totally forgets that the key is there. So she doesn't open it and she runs out of time. And now it's like, well, one, you couldn't even open the thing. And two, the key was next to you and bang, now you're dead. So when we're in high stress situations, are we going to remember what we learn in our film class, right? Or what we teach in our film class of, hey, maybe don't run up the stairs. Maybe run outside, grab your cell phone, call 911 while you're at it, right? So it is interesting that that did happen to Cece. But when you're in high stress situations, are you going to remember your survival if you don't put them to practice all the time? So it is fascinating. And that is the good of Scream, because now that we're in Scream 6, right? We have 8 stab films within the Scream franchise. And we are telling the story of all these real people that did die because they did do stupid mistakes. So almost everybody should be aware, maybe I should not do these things. And they still do it. And they will always do it. Which means we will probably do it if it happened to us. What did you think about the kill count in this movie and like the gore? Do you feel like it was genuine? Like, were you pleased by it? Or did you feel like they were really catering to those people that want to see more?
That's a good question, because in Scream 1 we saw gore, but like a lot of the 90s movies, all the blood is very red. It's like cherry red, so it doesn't look like real blood. But in Scream 2 they definitely dialed it up, because there was a lot more like face stabbings. There was the rod that went through one of the cops' heads and everything. And so I think to a certain extent they were catering to the people that wanted to see more gore, but who's to say that that's not just the Scream audience, you know? Maybe the Scream audience is that group that they're catering to, you know? That people did want more gore, because I think that it actually helped the movie, because it kind of made the stakes higher, like the kills are gorier, and it's also like, you know, they're dead now. Like, I think especially in Scream 1, it was like, especially like when the friend gets like killed by the garage door opener, there's like no blood, she's just kind of hanging there, like she barely gets stabbed and stuff, and it's like, okay, I mean, like the stakes don't seem as high, it doesn't feel as real, but once you start to up the gore, I think it gets more intense, more real, and it's like, oh, like I feel like that's more of what a killer probably would do, you know? So I think it helped the movie by upping the gore. And then it's also like when Randy gets killed, there's like the blood dripping out of the van, which also happens in Scream 1, but it's like then you actually see the body, and like I think it's important that we see the body of the person that is killed, because then it's like, okay, they're dead. Like, you know for sure that they are.
Yeah, which almost follows the rules. Like, if you never saw a body, then they didn't die. Which, Stu Mocker, we never really saw a body. So is he really dead?
Yeah.
I know I was coincidentally reading earlier this morning, like random stuff, and it shows that I believe one of the producers or maybe a writer of Scream 1 wanted to bring Stu back in Scream 3. And he had like a whole thing of how he would have brought him back and why he's alive and how he would look. Obviously a TV did fall on him, right? So like his face would be all scarred. So there's always a possibility, because there's already a whole story as to how he would come back. But yeah, if there's no body, are they really dead? So it is important to show bodies, and I agree. I will say the gore in this one was mid. Like, it wasn't, oh my gosh, it's so gore. Like, it's no Saw.
Comparatively.
Yeah. But it's in comparison to 90s movies, right? If we're coming straight from 80 movies, like the Halloweens from the 80s and the Friday the 13th from the 80s, this was a little more gory than some of those films. However, it was still pales in comparison to the Freddy Kruegers of the more recent times and like the Friday the 13th and Halloween's of those 90s, late 90s movies. And so it was okay. I would say that it does tell you it's more realistic than killing someone off screen and then showing the body all of a sudden. Although doing that kind of makes you a lot more tense because now it's a thriller, not a horror.
Yeah.
So it definitely upped it to be a proper slasher film, which is always nice.
Yeah, I agree.
And I do enjoy 90s slashers.
Yeah.
In comparison to other movies, at least. I do like them.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised that they had less gore in Scream 1 because Wes Craven did write the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's like I feel like one of the goriest OG slasher films because there's just a lot more blood in general, and then for it to be so dialed back in Scream 1, and it's kind of nice to see it more in Scream 2 because it's I feel like more of Wes Craven's style.
Yeah. What scene in Scream 2 stands out to you the most?
That's a good question. I think that final scene of like where everybody's like showing up all the time and
All the reveals.
yeah, all the reveals. I always enjoy the reveals, and just I really enjoyed the scene with Billy Loomis and Sydney and how they were trying to get to each other. So like Sydney was actually pretty smart and she closed herself backstage and like was trying to make everything fall on Miss Loomis, which I think was super smart because then it's like you're far enough away from the knife that you're not getting stabbed, but at least you're like tiring her out, you're getting her hurt, without actually having to put yourself in danger. I enjoyed the overwhelming amount of sparks that they put in that scene for no reason. And then I also really enjoyed that instead of Miss Loomis coming back, because they're all like looking down like into like the pit where the orchestra is, they're like, they always come back, and they're waiting for her to come back, and then Mickey pops up out of nowhere and they're like, ah, which I think is fun. It just fits with that Scream twists and everything.
For sure.
But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I also thought it was funny that they had Derek all tied up and had him there throughout the whole thing, and he's like totally dead. But I just liked all the chaos. It was very chaotic. And then the fact that the only thing Cotton Weary had to hear to like save Sydney was, yeah, I'll do the interview. And he's like, okay.
Which, would he have killed Sydney otherwise? Is Cotton enough of a villain to kill Sydney if she doesn't want to do an interview? I don't think he is. I think he's like, sure, he was acting like he was contemplating between am I going to go with her or am I going to save Sydney? But I don't think he would have killed her either way because he already went to jail for a murder that he did not commit. He's not about to actually commit a murder to the daughter of the woman that he slept with, who he generally had feelings for at one point. So I don't know.
I think it's an interesting question because I think that Cotton thinks he's a badass without actually being one. And you can kind of see that in Scream 3, actually, the opening of Scream 3 with his girlfriend, that he just messed around with her. And I think he had like a ghost face mask he would chase her around the house with. And she'd be like, Cotton, stop. Like, I don't want this. And he's like, ooh, I'm scary. And so it's like, I think there might be a couple screws loose for Cotton, like 100%. Like to be making fun of stuff like that with your girlfriend. Like, I wonder how far he would go for like anything, just because he is just like seeking that fame. And I wonder if he would have shot Sydney simply for the fame. Like, not because he didn't like Sydney, but he's like, if I don't get this interview, maybe if I kill Sydney, then I'll get an interview,
Yeah. That's fair. The standout scene for me is, I think, what play were they rehearsing for? Was it Othello?
No, I don't think so. Let me actually look it up because I was also wondering what play it was.
Yeah. Well, for whatever play there was. So when she was seeing Ghostface in that scene, like that stands out to me because it's a very interesting one where it's like, well, is she imagining it, or like is she traumatized, or is she actually seeing him? Which I'm assuming it was Mickey that was the one that was there because Mickey has more access to everything. So it's curious. So that scene was pretty good. I think they really did that scene really well because you don't know. Because then she goes ahead, freaks out, and then everything's normal. But we don't see anybody. Like, we don't see any evidence of anybody being there. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it was called Orestia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's like some tragedy. And Sydney plays Cassandra. Anyway, I actually would be, not in this podcast, but it'd be really interesting to see the parallels between that play and Scream 2 at some point. I think that kind of stuff is really interesting. If maybe, like, there's a reason they picked that play, you know. Yeah. But I thought it was really enjoyable. I thought it was cool. And again, like, I loved just all of the chaos that you are like, is this real or is this in her head? You know, because then Derek comes like right away, and you're like, that seems suspicious, but it's like it ends up not being. You know, it's just those red herrings. So if he had been one of the killers, I think it could have explained away that situation. But because he wasn't, it still leaves that question of, like, is this like PTSD or is this?
Yep, for sure. Which brings me to this point where Scream 2 did a lot for the horror genre in the sense of creating dual killers, creating those red herrings that you see now often in movies. It kind of helped the American horror movie formula really solidify itself. But also the reasoning why people do what they do. So in a lot more movies now, people sometimes commit crimes just for the sake of committing crime, which is Mickey. And then you have other instances where people do the crime or these mass murders because they are looking for revenge, which is Mrs. Loomis. There's a movie out in, I think, Hulu, maybe Peacock, called They Them. It's about transgenders and transformation camps. I think they're called transformation camps. Or correction camps.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. I'm ignorant, so I apologize to anybody in that regard. But the movie starts Kevin Bacon, and it's basically parents send their gay child or transgender child to conversion therapy camps. Holy crap.
You got it.
To convert them back to quote unquote normalcy, right? And then we find out who the killer is because people start dying. Specifically, the camp counselors start dying. And it's almost when the movie starts, they show you a scene and you're like, I already know what's going to happen. So you already know, but you don't know why. And then when you find out the why, it's very Mrs. Loomis's, like, this is what happened, so therefore I'm an avenging angel, right? The question is to you, what do you think the Scream 2 has done for the horror genre, if anything?
Yeah, I think that it kind of solidified the idea of sequels, and that you can have a sequel and have new killers, but still tie back to the first one, you know? And it helped, I think, also just the meta genre in general to have the ability to create these new ideas, but having just, you know, like that basic kind of tropes that people want to see while also creating something new, you know? Yeah. I think that it helped people like be able to structure like their horror movies after something that's so common, you know? Yeah, I'm not really sure, but
I like that idea that it solidified sequels because let's take, for example, Halloween 1979, I think it came out, and it spawned a bunch of sequels after it, right? So 1, 2, they're kind of in relation to each other. 3 was Season of the Witch, which they wanted to kind of create a anthology series, which is actually one of my favorite Halloweens, just because it doesn't have to do anything with Michael Myers, and you could almost explain away a lot of things. But then we have 4, 5, and 6, where they started exploring the idea where Michael is part of this cult, or his family was part of this cult, and he is the child that was offered up every 1,000. It was weird. However, it just went in a weird direction Same thing with Friday the 13th. You have your first one, which it didn't have anything to do with Jason per se. It was Jason's mom doing all the killings. Then you have 2, 3, 4, and 5. He dies, comes back, and then now he's supernatural. And then it kind of tried to explain why he's supernatural, and it kind of just dropped. Same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street. So it was like they created sequels with these awesome characters, but the sequels tend to fall off, right? Scream 2 made it where you don't need to have the same killer. Now it's not Michael Myers, is Michael Myers' mask. You don't need Freddy Krueger, you need Freddy Krueger's claws. You don't need Jason, you need the mask and the machete. So Scream is you don't need Billy Loomis and Stu Macher to come back all of a sudden and kill people. What you need is a reason why they want to target Sidney Prescott and whoever is associated with Sidney Prescott, right? You could take Gail Weathers out, you could take Dewey out, but the only person that matters for you to kill is Sidney Prescott. What is your reasoning? Well, she got my son killed. Great reason. How about you? Well, my mom left me and only gave her attention. Okay, mama's boy, you need attention. Got it. Checked off. How about you? Well, she got famous and she's my cousin. All right, great. And you just start checking off. Like, it could be any reason. As long as you want to kill Sydney, you have a Scream movie. And now, as long as you want to kill Sam and Tara, you have a Scream movie, which is perfect. You don't need the same character. You just need to don their mask and know why and their purpose. So that's what Scream 2 did. And I think they did really, really well in presenting that idea.
Totally. Yeah, I think you make really, really good points, because I love that Scream is not very specific people aside from like Sydney, but instead it's that purpose and the desire to do something or want something or become something that you aren't, Yeah. So.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Scream is probably so beloved by so many people, is because they didn't lose sight as to what Scream was. It's a slasher film that comments on slasher films. And as long as you have that reason to comment on slasher films and wanted to kill Sydney, you're good to go. So that's a good thing. So that being said, what is your rating of Scream 2?
My rating of Scream 2, I'd say probably a 4.5.
Okay.
The only reason I don't give it a 5 is because I think that we could have seen a little more from Mickey before he was unveiled. But otherwise, I just think it's great. I think they did a great job of creating the sequel that still felt like it was within the Scream universe. And it also tied back to the original while also totally being a new thing. They're continuing this new idea of family, like we've talked about in previous episodes, of like that connection to family throughout all of the Scream series. And I think it's also just really cool to see these new these same characters come back, and also introducing these new ones. I think that they dialed up the intensity by having legacy characters on the line. I'm sad that Randy died, because I'm a Randy and Sydney shipper. I'm not sure if there's many of those, but I really wanted them to be together. I wanted Randy to be happy. But yeah, I think they did a great job. I just really enjoyed it. The only thing I'd take away is just having a little bit more from Mickey.
Nice. I would give it a 4 out of 5. It is by far the best sequel to a horror movie ever made, in my opinion. However, it does have issues where one of our killers we don't see enough, which almost gives you a hint that he is the killer, because once he is removed visually, all the killings start to like kind of stack up to each other. And there's a little bit of doubt of whether it's him or Derek. However, it kind of takes away from it. I will also take away a star in addition to the reason with the Mickey thing, because again, I cannot believe that Mrs. Loomis and Sydney never cross paths. It's kind of hard to believe that. Although, as I'm saying this, I kind of remember a scene where all the reporters are coming down the stairs with Sydney, and then she is far, like by a tree, and then approaches Gail. So like, Gail is here, and then Mrs. Loomis is here, and then all the reporters over here. So it's kind of like, in that sense, maybe. But you would also think that maybe you will look and you'd be like, was that who? Nah. Like, something to indicate that she may have seen someone, but not really. So that's what throws me. Oh, Randy. Like, how did Randy not see her at some point? So because of that, I'm like, it's not believable enough for me. Like, I cannot suspend my belief that much. So just for that, those two things, I would go ahead and say it's a 4 out of 5, even though it's a fantastic sequel. But a 4 out of 5 for sure.
And I was actually just thinking as you were talking, I think something that they do really well in the Scream movies is that scenes can hold up without having Sydney in them. So like the scenes with Randy, Dewey, and Gale can still be just as entertaining if Sydney's not there. And having Sydney there is really awesome, and I love seeing Sydney on screen, but like we can still have the story progress and have those enjoyable scenes of Scream without having to have that main character there all the time, you know?
No, absolutely. But I think that's it. We have one more Scream movie left.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Scream 1996 next, and I'm excited. I'm excited to hear your rating on Scream. Just because I think I know my rating, but I'm excited to hear yours. Yeah. So, what do you guys think? What do you give Scream 2? Do you think it's a good movie? Do you think it's a good sequel? Does it hold off on its own? Can it stand alone without the name Scream? Can we call it Stab? Terrible joke. But yeah, but that's it. Take us out.
I need it to like be plastered somewhere.
I am literally gonna get you a teleprompter.
That's a good idea.
Just to read it. Do it again.
Okay. Do it again. Make sure to read those comic books, watch that anime, watch those movies, rock and roll, and stay nerdy.
There you go. You got it this time.